Within days of the Bondi attack, the opposition leader called for immediate parliamentary action by the Prime Minister.
We demand that the Parliament is recalled to pass legislation to eradicate anti-Semitism and counter violent extremism. That can happen as early as next week.
A call the opposition renewed on a near-daily basis.
We should have come back as a parliament before Christmas. The New South Wales Parliament came back. We should have been talking about these issues. We should be talking about them now in the National Parliament.
Today, as a parliamentary committee probed the government's proposed anti-hate speech changes, the opposition was busy tapping the brakes.
Is it better that we try and take our time to get the elements of the legislation that need fixing now right, instead of just passing it as is?
Senior Liberals are now actively leaning towards opposing the government's wide-ranging bill when Parliament is reconvened next week, a fortnight earlier than scheduled. And in doing so, the opposition would have to stare down the inevitable charge of political hypocrisy.
When you say, should we be taking this more slowly, there is I think, a legitimate urgency about this legislation in view of recent events.
For everyone who's made a speech or everyone who's sought to say that the government hasn't done enough, well, those words will be very hollow if the Liberal Party doesn't come in and support us.
The government's bill has created two big headaches for the opposition. The first is that it includes gun law changes, with increased scrutiny by security agencies of firearm buyers. Backing those measures could leave the National Party vulnerable to a campaign by its pro-gun One Nation rivals.
We're law-abiding farmers. We haven't done anything wrong. And I don't think they'll tolerate us if we started voting for greater regulations on how people live out here.
What problem are we trying to solve here? Taking guns off law-abiding citizens is not the appropriate response.
The second headache comes from the Coalition's Libertarian and Conservative factions, which regard the Prime Minister's plan to criminalise incitement of hate as overreach.
They're the biggest attack on free speech since Robert Menzies tried to ban the Communist Party in the 1950s.
While some Liberals say there is still time to amend Labor's legislation, sources told 7:30 that Susan Lee's main goal now is to keep the Coalition from splintering again, which could involve opposing the hate speech bill, not least as key party figures, including potential leadership aspirant Andrew Hastie, have already staked out their position.
From the top, I'll be voting no to this bill. I'll be voting against it for two main reasons. The first is this bill is an attack on our basic democratic freedoms: freedom of conscience, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion.
He has also accused Labor of forcing complex legislation through Parliament in a few days.
Moreover, there is a Royal Commission now which will make a sweeping examination of the December 14 Bondi Beach terror attacks. And wouldn't it be wise if we waited for the Royal Commission to report its findings and then act prudently as a Parliament?
The Liberal Party's resistance to the government's anti-hate speech reforms could lead Anthony Albanese to negotiate an alternative deal with the Greens. That would likely mean expanding the bill's explicit protections to other groups.
This is something that we've raised in the past, that we would like Islamophobia to be added and the vilification against vilification against religion to be included as part of the bill.
Once we get those bills through, of course, we would be open to considering an extension of the details of that bill to other areas of hatred.
In the meantime, former Home Affairs Chief Mike Pizzullo today told the committee the hate speech reforms are the right thing to do.
It's the most consequential change in this area of law since 9/11.
So vital, they should have been put in place when anti-Semitism surged in the wake of the Israel-Gaza war.
I would argue some of them were important things we needed to do 2 years ago.
Yep.
When we heard the cries on the Opera House steps. Are these important now? Yes, they are. Damn straight they are, but they're also important 2.5 years ago. Why weren't they pursued then?
While there's concern about the pace of these changes and potential consequences, the Coalition risks disappointing the very groups it has championed.
if we have to just take what is on offer now rather than nothing, I think we will take what's on offer now.
And for more on this, I spoke to the former Deputy Prime Minister and leader of the Nationals, Michael McCormack. Michael McCormack, welcome to 7:30.
Thank you.
Senior coalition figures were at one after the Bondi terror attack on the need to tackle the scourge of anti-Semitism and to do it quickly. Yep. Why on earth, therefore, would you oppose legislation that aims to do just that?
Well, the legislation is being put to the Parliament as an omnibus bill. So there are two very, very different bills rolled into one. One is about gun reform and the other one is about hate speech. Now, you can't roll those two in together because they really need to be separate and they need to be debated separately. But at the same time, we're being expected to make nationally significant reform in just 2 days, and that is the House of Representatives and the Senate. Now, if in the past we had nationally significant reform such as Mabo or same-sex marriage or indeed the voice, it was very much part of a process where it was put before the nation, it was debated in the Parliament, it went off to Senate committees and inquiries and community were involved and all sorts of things. This is being rushed through as an omnibus bill and we're expected to vote and make the changes in just 2 days.
But this is Australia's worst terror attack. Excuse the interruption. Australia's worst terror attacks. Security agencies say the threat is real and it's still out there. Why wouldn't the Parliament be urgent in bringing in legislation, passing legislation to tackle it?
Why didn't we go back before Christmas when we probably should have? And I wouldn't have cared if we had to sit right through January. We are the lawmakers of the country, and if it takes all of January and politicians miss out on their summer holiday season, well, so be it. But we shouldn't be expected now to just go back and decide this in 2 days.
OK, let's break it down. There are two parts of this bill, hate speech and gun laws. Let's start with hate speech. The bill creates serious offences for hate preachers and leaders seeking to radicalise children. It also increases penalties for hate crime offences. What is wrong with that? Well,
I will agree to this when the first lot of radical Islam hate preachers get on the plane and leave Australia. But that's not going to happen. And what we're seeing here in hundreds of pages of legislation is wide-ranging changes to, well, many people will say the free speech that we have enjoyed and had for many, many years. And we've got a Prime Minister going out talking about the Old Testament. I mean, it is very confusing. And if it's very confusing for the lawmakers of the land, how confusing must it be for the general public at large?
What's confusing about going after people who preach hate?
Well, what we should have been doing is making sure that the anti-Semitism wasn't in our country for the past 2 years. Ever since October 7, 2023, we've had protests where there's been some vile and hateful things said. And unfortunately, those protests and all the hate speech around it has unfortunately led to what we saw on Bondi Beach on December 14. And now, because we've had 15 people so tragically taken, we've got this two bills put into one, gun reform and hate speech. There's so much in that bill. There is so much to be considered. And I must say, when we stop the protests where the vile speeches are at, when we stop the hatred on university campuses, and when we stop it in shop front windows in country Australia, well, I'll believe that we've actually achieved something. But sadly, I don't believe that this hate speech legislation, with all that's wrapped up in it, with the Prime Minister making confusing messages about the Old Testament of the Bible, I don't believe it quite gets to the nub of what the issue is, and the issue is anti-Semitism. That's been the issue all along.
You've raised concerns about free speech. How is tackling hate speech an assault on free speech?
Well, that's the thing. I mean, you can't just... With free speech comes responsibility. It really does. And so... but what worries me is that with this legislation, could it be that somebody criticising the government or its migration policy then be deemed to be offending the new legislation and therefore going against the new law that, if it does pass the Parliament, then becomes enacted.
OK, let's go to the gun law aspect of this bill. The legislation seeks to restrict the import of high-powered weapons. It'll give much greater scrutiny to intelligence agencies over firearms buyers and, of course, will bring in, as you mentioned, that national gun buyback. What is wrong with that element of the bill?
Well, look, you've got farmers who need guns to rid their properties of feral pests. You've got recreational shooters, you've got law-abiding citizens who have always done the right thing. Guns don't kill people. It's people with murderous intent and hatred in their hearts who kill people, Michael. And that's what we've seen on Bondi Beach. That's what we saw at Port Arthur. Now, after Port Arthur in 1996, Tim Fischer and John Howard changed the laws, and rightly so, and there'll be some who think they went too far, but I agree with what they've done. They have made sure that we've got some of the tightest gun restrictions in the Western world. But what we need to make sure is that we've got the state and federal agencies working together to ensure that non-citizens shouldn't get access to firearms, so to make sure that those who do have firearms are storing them and using them in the right way. And we've got the right laws, but now we want to go and punish law-abiding citizens by taking even more guns away from them. And people have said, oh, well, there's more guns in Australia now than there were during Port Arthur. Yes, well, there's also 10 million more people in Australia now.
But no one's talking about taking guns off farmers and sports shooters. In fact, in New South Wales, your home state, the government rushed through legislation that allows farmers and sports shooters up to 10 guns each.
Well, let's see how the federal law works in place with the state law. Let's see what comes of this.
Well, the federal law will work with the state laws in terms of there's a 50-50 split for the gun buyback.
Well, I think what we have seen are law-abiding citizens being unfairly blamed, and that's always the case when you get a reaction such as this, a very emotive reaction. And I appreciate we need to do everything we can to make Australia a more secure and safer place. I do.
Is it more likely than not, excuse the interruption, that the National Party at least will vote against this bill, this omnibus bill, as it now stands?
Well, it seems that way. Now, we haven't met as a party. I've obviously discussed it with a few of my colleagues, but we haven't actually met as a party. We will look at, obviously, the legislation before the Parliament resumes next Monday, and we'll reach a decision. But we'll do so in the interests of not only regional Australians, but we'll also, as we always do it in the national
And if the Liberal Party in the end might raise some objections, but if the Liberal Party does support the legislation, are the Nationals prepared to split with the Liberals on this particular issue?
The Liberal Party is a different party than the National Party, and
well, that's the very question. So the National Party would be prepared to split?
Well, when you say split, we might divide on this particular bill.
Yeah, that's the point. So you might divide on this bill, right?
Leaving the coalition, I'm not quite sure that's going to be such a great idea. We tried that last year, didn't work so well. But certainly, if we don't have the same common ground as the Liberal Party, well, we're prepared to vote differently on this particular bill, like we did with the single wheat desk marketing bill all those years ago.
Michael McCormack, thanks for your time.
Thanks, Michael. All the best.